Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another video where today I am going to be going over my overall thoughts on Final Fantasy 15, and I have a feeling this video is going to be quite a long one because there's a lot of things that I want to cover. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So where do I even begin with this game? One thing I should probably preface before we jump in a whole lot is this was my first Final Fantasy game, and that might be why some things were a little confusing for me, because this was the first game I've played in the series, so there might be some things that I didn't understand because I hadn't played any other games in the series. So I just want to get that out of the way first. But one thing that I will say is I think the story of this game was fantastic, and it hooks you immediately. Like, it gets to a point where you don't want to not play it because the world is so engrossing and the story is so gripping that you don't want to stop playing it. Like you can see in the bottom left corner of the screen, I've played this for 27 hours, and there's still so much that I have to do. Like, this game is not short on content. There is tons that you can do, and even just going around the map and exploring is fun. So, one of the things that I will start with is I covered that I think every character was done well. I think Gladio to me was probably the weakest character, just from what we got in the main story. And I know there are DLCs that go into more detail on tons of the characters. I'm not going to be covering those. One, because I haven't played any of them. And two, because I want this to be just the base game, what everyone is going to be playing through, not anything that you need to buy separately to get the experience of. Yeah, I think Gladio is probably the weakest character, for me at least. I think everyone else was done fine. Of the four, of our main four, Prompto is probably my favorite. I might be biased because he's the photographer of the group, but I think everyone was done well. But like I said, I think Gladio was the weakest character in the game. Just because I don't think there was a whole lot there for his character. I think, honestly, if I'm thinking about it, I think Lunafreya was probably the best handled character, even though she didn't get a whole lot of screen time. I think she was probably the character that was handled the best in the story. And I'll just go in and cover my thoughts on the story as a whole. I think it starts off really strong. It starts off as basically just a road trip, essentially, and I think aspects of that are kept through the game. Like, as you can see, your main mode of transportation is the Regalia, and it's basically makes it into a road trip, and I'm completely fine with that. That is amazing. One of the things that I love about this is just, it's one of those games that even if you don't want to do any quests or anything, you can just explore its world and have an amazing time with it. But back to the story, I think it starts off really well, and it just keeps building. The further you get into the story, the more it builds, and the more intriguing it becomes. And I think there were aspects that I didn't fully understand, especially towards the ending of the game, which I know a lot of people are also confused about, and there have been a lot of theories and speculation on what people think the ending means, so I'm glad I'm not alone in confusion, but we'll get to that. It starts off really smooth, and the way that they introduce Arden, who is the main antagonist of the game, I think was really interesting because they don't build him as a villain from the start, and they didn't really give any hints to the fact that he would become a villain later. And I'm a little confused on his character in certain aspects, and I'm sure he was fleshed out more in his DLC, but like I said, we're not covering the DLCs, we're just covering the main game. But I don't really have anything to say on the story except that I really liked it. I think that certain aspects were stronger than other aspects, like the middle, not the whole of the middle of the game, but aspects in the middle of the game, like the latter middle, got not confusing, but it felt like certain characters had a shift that didn't fully make sense to me. And if you've played the game, you probably know what I'm talking about. But certain things I don't really think made sense for the characters. But yeah, I think from a story direction outlook on it, it was really, really good. But getting on to the ending, I am so confused because, and like I said at the beginning, it might just be because this is the only Final Fantasy game I've played. So I don't know the world, and I don't know, like, the rules of the world. I don't know, like, how magic and all that works in this universe. So I don't know if that is something that would make more sense, if that would be something that makes more sense if I had context from the other games. I don't know if it would or not, but, how I kind of got it was, and I'm getting this mostly from that mini end credits segment. I was kind of getting the idea that it was supposed to be like time loops. It's sort of how I was seeing it, because at the end the dialogue from the very beginning of the game is played again. So this is kind of the way that I understood it, and you guys can correct me in the comments because I don't know a whole lot about this universe, but I'm very intrigued. I kind of got the idea that in this universe, it kind of functions sort of like the Force does in Star Wars, where the only way to have full peace would be it, like, the light and the dark are in, like, balance. And I think, and this is kind of just me going on a theory, but I think that it might be that time will keep looping on itself until that balance is met. And especially because of something that Arden says at the end of the game when you're on the final fight, gives me the impression that he might know about the loop. And to a certain extent, I think Luna might as well, but there's not evidence for that. That's just me thinking that would make sense. And in a lot of ways, Nox's father, King Regis, I think that's his name. If I'm wrong, future me editing this will correct. In a lot of ways, I think he was trying to set Noct up for that and setting the ground rules for all of this. So what my idea is is that Noct is kind of like the neutral. He's like the mix of the good and the bad in this universe. And Luna is the full side good. Ardyn is the full side bad. But even then that gets kind of weird because Ardyn isn't fully bad. There are things that are revealed later that make it so that it seems like he's not fully bad, so I don't know. That's just me trying to make sense of the ending. That was very confusing for me. But those are my thoughts on the story and the ending as a whole. One last thing is I think that there's a lot of room for the story to be expanded upon in future media, whether that be in other DLCs. And granted, I haven't played through the DLCs, so there might be things that I'm missing that would build onto the story. I don't know. And I think that this universe and this story particularly could be fleshed out in, I think, a book series. Maybe not a series, but like one good book that delves into certain things would be perfect for this. And one of the reasons I think that the ending works so well is because of its vague nature. It kind of leaves it up to interpretation, and that means that the story will resonate in different ways for different people. So I think that's one of the strong suits, actually, that it's so vague, but at the same time I kind of want a definitive answer to what happens to these characters. So I think in ways the vagueness of the ending works in the favor of the game, and in ways it works to the detriment of the game, but that's not really something that can be pinned down on this is good for the game, this is bad for the game, anything like that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the story as a whole and the ending especially. But let's get on to gameplay. Gameplay in this game is super fun. I really like the combat, and I know that Final Fantasy does a lot of turn-based combat in the past, like Pokemon does in its games, where it's the turn-based combat. This game doesn't have that, so it might be that I'm not getting the full, like, this is what Final Fantasy is from this, and I can see where fans of the series who have played it for a long time and have played the older games with the turn-based combat might be maybe not frustrated with this, but might not like it because the combat is so different to the other games. I personally thought it was good, and there are aspects of turn-based with this, like where you need to build up that gauge where you can send Ignis Prompto or Gladio in to do their, like, special move. So there are aspects of turn-based to it. And I think this was a nice transition into the more real-time combat that I think the series might be leading to, because I know that the Final Fantasy VII remake had combat similar to this as well. So I think that might just be where the series is going, maybe, but I don't know. But yeah, I really liked the combat, and one of the other things that I've seen be a big source for controversy in this game is what we're approaching right now, actually, the Regalia, as your main mode of transport. I actually really like it. I think it's a really fun way of exploring the world, and tonally, I think it fits the game really well. Because, like I touched on earlier, it's just like a road trip with the 4 friends, and I think with the car being your main mode of transportation, I think that fits that tone really well. So the car as the main mode of transport I really like, and you can change it a little bit. Like there's the Regalia Type F, which changes the car to where it can fly, which I haven't done yet, so I can't really give my thoughts on that. But there is also, I don't remember what it's called, so I apologize for that, but there's also a different mode that you can do for the Regalia that kind of turns it into an off-road monster truck, which means that you can use the Regalia on like off-road, and you could go like out here with the car, and it doesn't just get locked to the base roads. That's another one I haven't really messed with all that much. I've just stuck to the normal Regalia, so I can't speak to that, but I'm fine with it because this is a huge map. I'll show you, like quick, this map is huge. And I can see where people would say that, part of an open world is just exploring it as the world just without any extra outside help. But I think if you didn't have the car, it would take so much longer to get anywhere in this game. And I think that it works in this universe with the way that they've laid everything out. I think the cars work in the way that this world and the story is presented. I think the car works. One of the last things I'm going to touch on in this video is just how the game like feels to play, like frame rate, all that stuff. I never really had any issues. I only encountered like one glitch, and that wasn't even a huge thing. It was just like a little bit of stuttering. And in the super high action scenes, frame rate can drop a little bit, but it's not jarring. Like, most of the time you're not really going to notice it. So I think it holds a pretty steady frame rate, and it doesn't drop below the average a whole lot. And like I said, in some certain super hectic scenes where there's tons of particle effects, tons of NPCs on screen at once, it drops a little bit, but you hardly notice that. So, overall, I really liked this game. And I like that even though I never played a Final Fantasy before this, I didn't feel lost. Like, sure, there are things that I might have understood better if I had more context from the world as a whole, from the Final Fantasy universe. Like, I know Chocobos from this, that alone, and from this game alone, I love chocobos, but from what I understand, they've been like a running thing that are in every Final Fantasy game, from what I understand. So, it might have had more of an impact when you get the chocobos in the game. It might have hit differently. So, certain things I think I would have benefited from having context, but in other ways, I think this works as a standalone game where you're not lost if this is the only Final Fantasy you've played. So, yeah. Overall, I really liked this game. I love playing it. I loved the story. And, yeah, those are my thoughts. Feel free to let me know your comments down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for even more content. And if you want to see more content by me, then be sure to follow me on my Instagram page, which is @NinjaFamilyEntertainment. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye, guys.